there is a kind of topic that begins to circulate quietly among the most attentive supporters, almost like an offhand remark in side conversations, but that gradually gains momentum and starts to dominate debates, timelines, and sports programs. At St. James Park, this atmosphere has begun to spread again recently. There is no official announcement, no direct confirmation, but there are signs, and when those signs appear, Newcastle United supporters learn to pay attention, because more often than not something important is being prepared away from the spotlight. This kind of situation creates a curious mix of expectation and unease. Every interview starts to be analyzed more carefully, every statement becomes a clue, every movement behind the scenes takes on greater significance. It is in this scenario that many supporters begin to connect the dots, trying to understand what is really happening behind the curtains, and that is exactly why following reliable news and detailed analysis makes all the difference. In fact, if you enjoy this kind of in-depth content, subscribing to the channel helps a great deal in keeping this work alive. In recent months, one specific name has started to appear more frequently in these discreet conversations. A young, highly valued player with modern characteristics who perfectly represents the club's new phase. When players like this enter the radar of European football giants, the noise almost always starts quietly, but it never ends small. Newcastle know this. The supporters do too. And it is at this point that the narrative begins to take clearer shape, even though the main revelation still needs to be handled with care. At the same time, the club tries to maintain a sense of normality. Training sessions, matches, press conferences, and carefully managed statements. On the outside, everything seems to be following the natural course of the season. On the inside, however, important decisions are being discussed. Decisions that could impact not only the current squad but the sporting project for the coming years. That is why every word spoken by directors and players starts to be examined closely by the most attentive supporters. Tino Livramento, one of the most promising names in the Newcastle United squad, has already given his response to rumours involving possible interest from Manchester City and a potential departure from the club. The future of the right-back has been widely debated in recent months, especially after speculation linking Pep Guardiola to a possible move for the player in the next transfer window. Since joining Newcastle United in 2023, Tino Livramento has built a path of rapid and consistent growth. In a short space of time, he became an England international, drawing attention not only for his talent but also for his versatility, capable of playing on both the right and left side of defense. The 23-year-old fits perfectly into the profile of players highly valued in modern football, which naturally attracts interest from Europe's top clubs. Despite the recognition, Livramento's season has also been marked by significant physical challenges. The fullback struggled with injuries throughout the year, including an 8-week spell-out with a knee problem. When he finally returned to action, a muscular setback in his thigh, suffered in the match against Leeds United 2 weeks ago, once again interrupted his run. Even so, interest in his football has not diminished. It is in this context that Manchester City's name has become more strongly associated with the player. The Etihad Stadium club have shown in previous windows that they do not hesitate to act aggressively in the market when they identify a strategic opportunity. With the title race showing signs of difficulty, City's hierarchy recently strengthened the squad with young Premier League talents such as Antoine Semenyo and Mark Guéhi, showing that the planning remains ambitious. These moves have reinforced the perception that Manchester City could return to the market in the summer with even greater intensity. Although the recent signings may bring immediate negotiations to a close, behind the scenes there is an expectation that a concrete bid for Livramento could emerge as soon as the next window approaches. And it is precisely this scenario that has kept Newcastle supporters on constant alert. Amid so much speculation, Tino Livramento had already spoken publicly about his future. In an interview given to Newcastle World in November, the fullback was cautious and avoided making direct commitments regarding a possible contract renewal, with 2 years remaining on his deal at the end of the season. The matter has been treated as an internal priority by the club, especially to ward off interest from rivals such as Arsenal and Manchester City. On that occasion, Livramento made it clear that his focus was entirely on the pitch. According to him, contractual decisions were not under his direct control, being handled by his father and his agent. The player highlighted the effort he had made to return after weeks out and reinforced that his main focus was helping the team in the best possible way whenever he was available to play. The fullback also spoke about his satisfaction with performances in big matches, including against Manchester City themselves, stressing that this kind of game serves as extra motivation. His words were interpreted by many supporters as a sign of commitment to the Newcastle project, even without completely closing the door on the future. And it is precisely this balance in his statements that keeps the debate alive. Meanwhile, behind the scenes at the club, the message is clear. The new sporting director, Ross Wilson, has publicly confirmed that Tino Livramento's contract situation is treated as an absolute priority. In a statement made to supporters in December, Wilson said that Newcastle want to renew both Livramento and Sven Botman, reinforcing the intention to keep the young and talented core of the squad together. Ross Wilson acknowledged that negotiations of this kind are not always straightforward. Some move forward more quickly, others require patience. But the club's objective remains the same: to retain its key players and protect the long-term sporting project. According to him, it is still too early to say whether the players will accept the proposals, but talks are ongoing and form part of Newcastle United's strategic planning. This stance reinforces the idea that the club have no intention of making Livramento's departure easy. On the contrary, Newcastle understand the technical and symbolic value of the player who represents the new generation built after the club's rise to a higher level. For supporters, this brings a certain sense of relief, but it also maintains that typical transfer market tension, when everything can change very quickly. That is why following every update becomes so important. Small details can point to big decisions. A phrase in an interview, a movement behind the scenes, a prolonged silence. Everything matters. If you like staying ahead of these stories before they explode into the headlines, it is well worth subscribing to the channel, because the focus here is exactly this kind of deep and contextual analysis. In the end, the Tino Livramento case neatly sums up the moment Newcastle United are living through. A club that has become competitive again, that develops and values high-level players, and that now has to deal with constant interest from Europe's giants. Livramento's response to Manchester City, even if carefully measured, shows a player focused on the present, committed to his recovery and to his performances on the pitch. It remains to be seen how this story will develop in the coming months. The summer promises to be intense, and important decisions will need to be made. Until then, supporters remain attentive, following every chapter of this narrative that blends ambition, the transfer market and club identity. And if you want to keep following all these Newcastle United stories with depth and credibility, don't forget to subscribe to the channel.